The night a waitress slipped a note under my napkin at my own restaurant. It didn't just ruin my dinner. It cracked my whole life wide open. I'm Connor Blake, the guy people like to call a self-made billionaire, the face behind Blake Hospitality Group, the man who supposedly has it all together. And yet I walked into my own place dressed like a nobody and walked out with somebody's life resting on my shoulders. And if you think the bad guy in this story is just the manager who got caught, you might want to hear the rest before you decide. For years, the world saw me as the polished version of myself. The suits, the penthouse in Denver, the first-class flights, the photos in business magazines. To the public, I was the genius who turned a family recipe into Heritage Grill, this cozy, rustic, modern restaurant chain everyone in the Rocky Mountain region seemed to love. To my board, I was a machine that printed money. To my staff, honestly, I was more of a legend than a person. A name in emails, a face in a framed photo in the office. Somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like a human and started feeling like a logo with a pulse. You know what I mean? That kind of numb, drifting feeling where everything looks shiny, but nothing feels real. 2 nights before everything went down, I was having a quiet dinner at one of my own locations, the original Heritage Grill in downtown Denver. I was half listening to some investor talk about expansion swirling a glass of wine when a young waitress came by with my water. Her hands were shaking. She set the glass down, adjusted my napkin like she'd been trained to, and something small and folded brushed the back of my hand. I looked down, and there it was, a crumpled piece of paper half hidden under the napkin. I opened it under the table. The handwriting was tight and uneven. The manager, Victor, is stealing from the restaurant. He threatens us. My brother Noah is very sick. He said he'll hurt him if I talk. Please, if you know someone who can help us. I don't know what else to do. No one addressed it to me. She had no idea the note had gone straight to the owner himself. I read it over and over at that table while the investor kept talking about profit margins. By the 5th time, my chest felt tight. By the 10th, it wasn't just business anymore, it was personal. I knew Victor Kane. On paper, he was loyal, efficient, a rock according to regional reports. 6-7 years on the payroll without a single formal complaint. And yet here I was staring at a note written by hands that had clearly been shaking, asking for help inside a place that was supposed to be built on my family's values. If I ran it through legal or corporate channels first, it would turn into a case number and a committee meeting. I didn't want a report. I wanted the truth. So the next afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror in my Cherry Creek penthouse and stripped away every piece of the billionaire costume. No navy suit, no expensive tie. I pulled on a faded gray t-shirt and a pair of old jeans with frayed pockets. I took off my Rolex, set it in the safe, and tied my hair back in a lazy knot I would never wear in public. Not as Connor Blake, the brand, anyway. When I looked at my reflection, I barely recognized the guy staring back, and for the first time in a long time that felt like a good thing. No chauffeur, no security detail, no assistant hovering with a tablet. I walked 3 blocks and flagged down a regular taxi like any other local. The driver, a man in his 60s with a salt and pepper mustache, glanced at me in the rearview mirror and asked, "Where to Buddy Heritage Grill?" I said. "Downtown. The first one." He nodded, merged into traffic, and we rolled through Denver as the late afternoon sun bounced off the glass of office towers. In the distance, the Rockies sat on the horizon like something out of a painting. The city felt raw and alive in a way my life hadn't felt in a long time. By the time we pulled up outside the restaurant that started it all, there was this knot in my stomach I couldn't quite swallow. I stepped inside through the front doors, not as the owner, not as the man whose name was built into the brand, but as a nobody in a t-shirt. And I felt it right away. The imbalance in the room, the way the air felt divided. People with suits and dresses were laughing near the windows, bathed in warm light and mountain views. The hostess glanced at me without really seeing me and said, "Table for one," like she already knew what kind of customer I was going to be. "Yes, ma'am," I answered. No recognition in her eyes. No warmth. She grabbed one menu, turned, and walked off without checking if I was following. She didn't seat me where the view was nice or where the lighting was soft. She took me straight to the back near the swinging kitchen door, next to the clatter of dishes and the sharp smell of cleaning chemicals. It was the graveyard section, the place you stick people you don't care about. Years ago, I had written into the training manual that no guest gets treated like that. Sitting in that back corner, watching how casually she did it, I realized that somewhere between expansion and profit reports, my philosophy had been rewritten without me. I was still processing that when I heard a voice behind me, warm and bright, like someone cracked open a window. "Hi, welcome to Heritage Grill. My name's Maya. I'll be taking care of you tonight." I looked up and saw her. Maya Rivera. She didn't look like the polished hostesses up front. No designer lipstick, no forced smile. Her hair was pulled back with a cheap clip, there was a tiny smudge of something on her sleeve, and her eyes were tired but kind. Not customer service kind. Human kind. "Thanks," I said quietly. "It's good to be here." "You been here before?" she asked, pouring water, actually making eye contact. "Not exactly first time," I said, being honest, "but it's been a while." She nodded. "Well, if it's been a while, you picked a good night. The steak tacos are kind of our pride and joy." There was this little twinkle when she said it, like she really believed in the food. "All right," I said, almost smiling. "You sold me. I'll have those." "You got it," she said, and walked away. I watched her move through the dining room, the way some staff shrank when a man in a dark suit walked by, the way others were moving like they were just trying to survive the shift. Then I saw him. Victor Kane. Tall, sharp suit eyes like polished stone, laughing too loud with a couple at the bar. He moved like he owned the place, not like he worked for it. I watched him casually slide a cash tip into his own pocket when he thought nobody was looking. I watched him cut off a young busboy mid-sentence, shove him aside with just enough force to make a point. "You don't talk to guests, kid, you clean. Get it?" The busboy nodded, eyes on the floor. Victor smirked and walked off. Every number on our balance sheet could have looked perfect, and still nothing in those reports would have shown me that moment. A few minutes later, Maya brought my drink, and Victor peeled away from the bar and headed straight toward us. "Maya," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, looking me up and down, taking in the t-shirt and old jeans. "Make sure this guy pays before you bring anything out." "All right, last thing we need is people walking out on their bill." It wasn't a policy reminder. It was a performance. A humiliation. Maya stiffened, her jaw tightening. "He just ordered, Victor," she said quietly. "I don't care," he snapped. "You heard me. We're not running a charity." A couple in suits nearby glanced over, then looked away like they were afraid of getting dragged into whatever that was. I smiled at Maya, just a little, like I was telling her, "You're not the one who should be ashamed here." She adjusted my napkin and leaned in for half a second. Her voice dropped to a breath. "I'm sorry he treats everyone in these back tables like this. Please don't take it personally." "Does he always talk to you like that?" I asked under my breath, not looking up. She hesitated. That tiny pause said more than a full sentence. "He's difficult," she whispered. Let me know if you need anything else." Her hands were shaking as she walked away. When she came back with my tacos, her movements were faster, more clipped. Her eyes kept flicking toward the bar where Victor stood pretending to check a bottle, but clearly watching her. As she set my plate down, something small brushed my fingers again. She didn't break stride, didn't look at me, just moved on to the next table. I waited until she was across the room, then lifted the edge of my napkin. Another note. Smaller this time, folded tight. I unfolded it slowly. He's watching me. I think he knows I told someone. If anything happens, please, please protect Noah. He's all I have. The ink was smudged. I could see where the pen had pressed hard enough to dent the paper. I looked up, and across the room I saw her watching Victor like he was a lit fuse, and Victor watching her like she was a problem he still wasn't sure how to deal with. I didn't touch the tacos. My appetite was gone. I paid the bill, left a generous tip I knew she might never see, and walked out into the cold Denver night with that note still in my hand. Outside, I could see my reflection in the window. No suit, no watch, just a man who had let something rot right under his own name. I took out my phone, opened a secure app my security director had practically begged me to delete a few years ago, when I settled down and typed one word, activate. A second later, the reply came. Online. Report. I typed Heritage Grill downtown compromised. Full surveillance on manager Victor Kane. Quiet. No corporate involvement. Priority safety of server Maya Rivera and brother Noah. I knew then this wasn't going to be solved with a board meeting. The next night, I met Maya in City Park. She had whispered the location to me when I asked, barely moving her lips, as she refilled my water, like the words might get her fired if anyone heard them. 8 p.m., City Park by the lake. She picked a public place on purpose. That's what people do when they're scared out of their mind, but still trying to be smart. I got there 15 minutes early and sat on a bench near the fountain, hands clasped, pretending not to be scanning every person who walked by. Families were walking dogs. Kids were racing their scooters. Couples were holding hands. And I was sitting there feeling more nervous than I had the day my company went public. At exactly 8, she appeared under the streetlights in a pale pink sweater and simple jeans, her hair down around her shoulders. Without the apron and the restaurant noise, she looked younger and more fragile, but the fear in her eyes was older than she was. "Thank you for coming," I said softly, as she sat down beside me. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "Victor followed me halfway here in his car. I had to duck into a grocery store and pretend to read labels until he left. I felt my blood run cold." "Has he done that before?" She nodded, staring at the ground. "Twice. He's paranoid lately. He keeps asking who I talk to, where I go after my shift. I think he knows someone said something, and I am hiding something. I'm hiding you." She gave me a quick, bitter half laugh. "He thinks I'm scared of him. He has no idea I might be stupid enough to trust a stranger in a faded t-shirt." "I don't want you to be stupid," I said quietly. "I want you to be safe. And I'm not exactly just a stranger, but we'll get to that. Right now, I just need the whole truth. No filter, no company line. Just you." She looked at me for a long moment, like she was measuring the risk. Then she exhaled and started talking. She told me about Victor's friends who showed up after closing. Men who never ordered food, who sat in the back and talked about shipments and territories and cash drops, not about reservations or wine pairings. She told me how Victor strutted around like a king when it was just staff and guests. But when those guys walked in, he got smaller, meaner, more desperate to impress. She told me about the night she walked past the office and saw him counting stacks of cash, and he caught her reflection in the glass, smiled without warmth, and said, "You didn't see anything, did you, Maya?" And then she told me about Noah, about the hospital, about sitting in plastic chairs all night listening to machines beep. Noah was younger, still a kid to her, with a condition that kept landing him in intensive care. She had begged Victor for more hours, more shifts, more anything, and at first he played the sympathetic boss. Then he showed her photos on his phone, pictures of Noah asleep in his hospital bed, and said something that made my hands curl into fists just hearing it. Accidents happen. You want to make sure nothing happens to your brother. You keep quiet. You don't see, you don't hear, you don't talk, or my friends stop by for a visit. As she said it, her voice broke on the word brother, and she had to look away. I wanted to put my fist through a tree. Instead, I reached out and let my hand rest near hers on the bench without touching. "Maya," I said, steady as I could manage, "you are not alone in this anymore. I need you to really hear that. I'm not just some guy who feels bad and tips well. I can actually move things." "Why?" she whispered, turning back to me. "Why would you risk anything for me? You barely know me. You ate half a plate of food, and suddenly you want to save my life. Because nobody gets to use a sick kid as leverage on my watch," I said. And that part of the sentence was pure instinct. And because when you slid that note under my napkin, you trusted that the person reading it might care. "I'm not going to let you down. Simple as that." She gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "You sound like you actually believe you can fix this." "I don't know if I can fix all of it," I said, "but I sure as hell can start." Before she could answer, I noticed movement in the dark line of trees behind her. One shadow, then another, then a third separating from the rest. Tall figures in dark jackets walking our way but trying to look casual. One lifted a phone to his ear, eyes locked in our direction. Another jerked his chin subtly toward us. My pulse spiked, but my voice stayed calm. "Maya," I murmured, "did you tell anyone you were coming here?" "No," she said, her voice shrinking. "Why?" "Because I think some of Victor's friends decided to crash our little conversation," I said. I stood up slowly, stepping in front of her, like I was just stretching. "Listen to me. Don't look at them. Look at me. Do you trust me even a little? I don't know," she said honestly, and I respected that. "Then trust the part of you that wrote those notes," I said. "The part that knew you needed help. Trust her for the next 5 minutes." She swallowed and gave the tiniest nod. "I trust that part," she whispered. "Good," I said. "Then when I say run, we run. Now." We took off across the park path, not sprinting at first, just walking fast, then faster, then practically jogging. Behind us I heard one of the men shout, "Maya," and her whole body flinched. "Eyes forward," I told her. "Stay with me." We cut across wet grass, hopped a low fence ducked behind a maintenance building, and headed toward the parking lot, where the lights were brighter and there were more people. Our shoes slapped the pavement, our breath coming out in visible bursts. Under a line of pine trees, we finally stopped. Both of us doubled over, hearts pounding. "What do we do now?" she gasped. "They're not going to give up. You don't understand what these guys are like." "We fight back," I said, and in that moment, the choice I'd been avoiding finally landed. "And that starts with me telling you something I should have told you from the very beginning." She looked up at me, eyes wide, still full of fear, but also something else. This raw need for answers. "Who are you, Connor?" she asked. I took a breath. My full name is Connor Blake, I said. I own Heritage Grill. All of them. The downtown location, the one you work at, every single one. Victor works for me even if he likes to act like he owns the place. And whatever he's involved in, that's on my shoulders too, whether I meant for it to happen or not. For a second, she just stared. You're the owner, she finally said, almost to herself. The guy they talk about in meetings. The one whose picture is in the office that I dust sometimes. You're that guy. Yeah, I said, feeling about 2 inches tall. I'm that guy. So you sat in my section in that sad little table by the kitchen, and you let him talk to you like you were trash just to see how he treated people he thought didn't matter. Her voice had heat in it now, not just fear. And you didn't tell me because, why, you wanted some dramatic reveal. I said quickly. I didn't tell you because people act different around rich people. I needed to know what was really happening in my restaurant, without the filters. And then it stopped being about the restaurant the second I realized what he was doing to you and Noah. I should have told you sooner. You're allowed to be mad. I'd be mad too. Before she could respond, the sound of sirens cut through the night, faint at first, then louder, echoing off the buildings. Blue and red lights began flashing at the far end of the park, growing brighter. 3 black SUVs rolled into the lot behind a line of Denver PD cruisers. Engines low, deliberate. He called the cops, she whispered. Victor called the cops and told them some story about me or us, or I don't even know, he's going to twist everything he always does. No, I said, exhaling for what felt like the first time in an hour. That's not Victor. That's me. The cruisers swarmed the area where the 3 men had stopped, clearly realizing their night had taken a turn. Officers stepped out, hands on holsters, voices steady and loud. From the SUVs, my private security team, the one I'd activated with that single word, moved like shadows. Efficient, calm, zero hesitation. People always picture billionaires with yachts and jets. They never talk about the quiet security details and investigators you hire when you realize money makes you a target and information is power. Within moments, the 3 men who had followed us were on the ground, handcuffed, their phones and weapons seized. One of my security leads walked quickly toward us, giving Maya a reassuring nod before turning to me. Mr. Blake, he said, we have the suspects in custody. Denver PD is coordinating with our intel, and we have the manager, Victor, detained at the restaurant. We recovered altered financial records, extortion messages, and communication with known criminals. It's handled. Maya's hand flew to her mouth. Her legs buckled and I grabbed her as she started to sink. The tears came then. Not small, polite ones, but those big, shaking sobs that come when your body finally realizes the worst might actually be over. I held her and just kept saying, "You're safe now. He's not touching you or Noah ever again. It's done." Later that night, after statements and paperwork and too many fluorescent lights, we ended up back at City Park, this time on a bench near the lake. The water reflected the city lights like a cracked mirror. She leaned against my shoulder, drained. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come in that night," she said, her voice small but steady. "You do," I said. "You already know. And you still walked back into work, and you still slipped that note under my napkin. You saved yourself the second you decided you weren't going to stay silent. I just happened to be the guy who read it." Over the next few weeks, I did something a lot of people like me hate doing. I shut down the downtown Heritage Grill location. Not for a remodel, not for a rebrand, but for a full internal investigation. We went through every camera, every schedule, every bank statement. I fired every manager who looked the other way or helped Victor keep his little kingdom of fear going. We rewrote policies not as a PR stunt, but with input from the people who actually worked the floor. We improved pay, added real protections, anonymous reporting, legal support for staff health care that actually covered family crises. And yeah, the headlines were brutal. Billionaire's beloved restaurant used as cover for crime. Empire tainted by corruption within. I read every one of them because I needed to sit in the discomfort of what I'd missed. Maya could have taken a payout and disappeared. Instead, she chose something harder. She stayed, not as a scared server this time, but as a supervisor in training, helping build the new culture from the ground up. She handed over recordings and screenshots and notes she'd kept, not because she trusted corporations, but because she'd decided to trust me personally, just enough to let me try to do better. 3 months after that night in the park, I walked down a hospital hallway with a paper bag that smelled like grilled meat and spices. The label on the door said, Noah Rivera. In the bag were the steak tacos Maya insisted on making herself, in the new Heritage Grill kitchen, the way she liked to serve them. She was waiting outside the room, fidgeting. "He's excited to meet you," she whispered. "He keeps asking if you're really the guy who ran through a park in beat-up sneakers." In my defense, I said they're very comfortable sneakers. She smiled, the first real relaxed smile I'd seen from her. Inside, Noah looked thinner than he should have, but his eyes were bright. So he said, eyeing me, "This is the famous billionaire, huh? You don't look that scary." "I get that a lot," I said. "I brought tacos as a bribe." "Good," he said. "Because if you ever make my sister cry again, I'm getting out of this bed and coming for you. I don't care what your net worth is." "Fair deal," I said, feeling my chest ache in the best way. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the Denver skyline, Maya and I stood on a little balcony outside the hospital, looking down at the city where all of this had happened. She leaned into me and I wrapped an arm around her. "You walked into your own restaurant pretending to be a nobody just to see the truth," she said softly. "And instead, you found a whole different life." "I found you," I said. "And I found out who I really am when the suit and the money are stripped away." She was quiet for a moment. "I'll be honest," she said. "I don't know if I trust you completely yet. Part of me is always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to decide this was just a phase and move on to something easier. But the other part of me, the part that wrote those notes, that part believes you might actually stick around." "I don't expect blind trust," I said. "I'm the guy who let this happen under his own roof. All I can do is show up again and again and choose differently. For you, for Noah, for everyone who wears our name on their apron." She smiled, just a little. "We already survived the worst night of our lives," she murmured. "I think we can survive whatever comes next. So here's where I hand it over to you. Now that you've heard what really happened, do you think Maya should trust me with her future? Or should she always keep one foot out the door, just in case I turn into every other billionaire stereotype? Do you feel like the justice Victor got? The arrest, the charges, the end of his little kingdom? Was enough for what he did, or do you think people like him never really pay the full price? And what about the bigger picture? Do you believe people at the top are responsible for every bad thing that happens under their name, even when they don't know about it, or is there a line somewhere? If you've ever had a boss like Victor, or if you've ever been in Maya's position, scared to speak up but desperate for change, I want to hear your story. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think I did enough or what you would have done in my place. Do you think love and trust can really grow out of a mess like this? Or is that just something we like to believe in stories? Share your experiences, your opinions, your own versions of this. Your perspective might be the note someone else needs to hear right now.